Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Magny Cours in France on a beautiful sunny autumn afternoon for the 10th, the final and the deciding round of the FIA GT Championship. I'm Martin Haven. Alongside me, I'm glad to say, the voice of reason, Andrew Gilbert-Scott. We're just about to see the second and final qualifying session get underway in a moment or two. Cars will go out onto the track for what may be a decisive hour or 45 minutes for the drivers of qualifying, because at the moment, with the championship finely balanced between Lister drivers Jamie Campbell-Walter and Julian Bailey, and 4.5 points behind them Mike Hazemans in his Viper, the three protagonists, the two Works Listers and the Hazemans Viper, are in the top three positions on the grid. However, this morning's qualifying session has seen most cars use both the sets of tyres they're allowed, but because none of these cars have raced here at Magny Cours before, and because it is a track that is very sensitive to temperature and changes drastically over a few degrees of variation, nobody's quite sure whether this session will be slower or faster. Now, there is a car that has got another set of tyres. That is the second Works Lister, and that is driven by Nicolas Springer and Philippe Favre. They have got another set of tyres. They're already fastest after the first session, and they may well go quicker again. Well, the first session this morning started at 9 o'clock, so it was early on, and as ever, the Belmondo Vipers, the 11 and 12 cars particularly, Marc Duez and Paul Belmondo in 11, and the number 12 car of Boris de Viescherburg and Vincent Voss were going quickly early on. It took a while for the Lister and Viper challenges to come alive. The Car Sport Holland Viper, the orange car, they were respectively quickest in each of the pair of time sessions yesterday. As you see Paul Belmondo there, the Listers were on top in the free practice 1, and the Viper was on top in free practice 2. Now here is Julian Bailey, ex-Lotus and Tyrrell Grand Prix driver, of course, and the mainstay of the Lister effort. Ended up second fastest to this car, the Springer and Favre car. And as I said, Philippe Favre, who has done, he reckons, 20,000 kilometres of racing here, has got another set of tyres. Now this is Nicolas Springer, the other driver of the car, and he's going to have a chance to start from the front row of the grid. This is the Car Sport Holland machine in the Dutch Racing Orange, and Mike Hazemans sharing this weekend with Tom Coronel, a pair that's already won in the championship this year, and they are chasing this car, the number 14 Lister. As I said, the pair of drivers of that, Bailey and Campbell-Walter, are 4.5 points ahead. Well, that's how they stand after the first qualifying session. 0.2 of a second in it between the two Listers, and as you can see, just 200ths in it between Bailey Campbell-Walter and the Hazemans Coronel car. Andrew, an unusual track for these teams, a chance perhaps in the second qualifying session for a few surprises as well. It's been sunny for the last couple of hours, starting to cloud over a little bit now. I think we could be in for a bit of a lottery, but we've been wandering up and down the pit lane this morning. What's your... we'll come back to that in a moment, as we're just about to see the cars going out. I was going to say that the tension seems to be fairly high here, and the final qualifying session for the final FIA GT race of the year is just starting, and the title protagonists first and second out of the pit lane, the Car Sport Holland Viper and the Lister Storm. I'm Martin Haven, live in Magny Cours, alongside me Andrew Gilbert-Scott. Andrew, a lot of tension between the Lister and the Viper teams, or not between them perhaps, but internally. I think they're both very aware that this could so easily swing either way.
Yeah, well, even though the qualifying may not be as important as this type of racing as it might be in, say, Formula 1, there's still, it proves a lot, and obviously it will worry the opposition depending on their grid position. But also now it has clouded over the cars. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see cars go quicker, as you were, saying earlier on. Normally when it gets hotter, the heat builds up on the track, and the cars will go, the engines will produce less power, so the cars obviously go slower. But now it's clouded over. It's not exactly hot. It's a beautiful day, but it's not hot, so it wouldn't surprise me at all to see some quick times coming through.
I'm sure some cars will have kept a second set of tyres for this afternoon session. Of course, if you've used your tyres or both sets of tyres in the first session, it doesn't mean they're useless. It just means you might not have the ultimate edge from them. I was talking to Julian Bailey earlier on, and he said his fastest time in the first qualifying session, which was good enough for an interim outside front row spot, on his 10th and final flying lap on the tyres. And he said you can go and do 2 or 3 fast laps, and then if you hit traffic maybe, or if you do those laps, you can then back off, cruise around for a couple, and the tyres will come back to you. Now, after you've done that 2 or 3 times, then they have really lost their ultimate edge, but still there is a chance, he thinks, that if the Hazeman's Viper goes quicker, they will be able to find something to respond. He's pretty sure that the Hazeman's car has used both its sets of tyres, and this is the sister car, incidentally, a second Car Sport Holland car. This for David Hart and Peter Cox. Julian Bailey reckons that if the Viper goes quicker, then there's no reason at all why the Lister shouldn't. And I guess that's a pretty fair logic. There you can see the Porsche of Wolfgang Kaufmann ahead of the first racing Ferrari 550 Maranello, and we've seen that car in all sorts of trouble mechanically during the course of the year. Looks great, sounds fine as well with that front-engined V12 HAL, but a brand new car and a very limited I think amount of help they're getting out of the Ferrari factory. So
yeah, well, it started obviously with quite a lot of enthusiasm, but then I think now it's turned into more of a semi-private effort, shall we say. But the car looks fantastic, and I think, having spoken to a few people earlier on, they are determined to try and get that car sorted out. And I think this weekend it's shown some potential, certainly for that. And maybe next year we'll see it as a front-running car.
Well, I think obviously Ferrari over the last few seasons, and all their sports car efforts have reflected this, have been concentrating entirely on winning the Formula One World Drivers' Championship. Once they've got a combination with Michael Schumacher and the cadre that surrounds him to actually do it, and they knew they were getting close, and so the 333 SP has been abandoned completely as their open-top sports car, and everything else that could possibly distract them as well has been taken out of the equation. So I think First Racing probably hoped that they would get something in the way of assistance, whereas in fact I'm sure that they would probably say that Jean-Denis Delatraz and Fabio Giraud would say that absolutely nothing's come their way, and they've been sort of left to struggle with it themselves. And against fully developed cars like the Vipers, which have been racing successfully in Europe for 6 years, and the Lister for the same sort of period as a race car, then they're really up against it.
Well, yeah, and very, very often, there's a car nicely parked there, but I think very often, the cars would quietly come into a championship like this, and nobody'd really notice them there as they did their development work. But of course, a Ferrari, and a stunning-looking Ferrari as it is, everybody knows it's there, and everybody's very interested. And of course, it pulls up, brings a lot of attention.
Absolutely.
But maybe it's quite embarrassing when it doesn't get the speed that one would expect from it.
If it was just a Porsche, or if it was just a Lamborghini, or just an anything, you're right.
Exactly.
It's the word Ferrari. You're cursed with the instant media attention that we've obviously given it right from the very first race back in Valencia. The car that went off, incidentally, Franco Bertoli and Paolo Rapetti, the Italian pairing in their Art Engineering GT3R, and this is the GT3R view of the circuit. You were just on board there with the KTM car, the Red Bull Porsche, coming towards us. Pair of those, by the way, we've got 2 of the Red Bull cars. Luca Riccitelli and Hans-Jörg Hofer, the teammates, have been split up, and they've been joined respectively, Luca Riccitelli by Dieter Quester and Hans-Jörg Hofer by Bob Wallach. Quite a number of cars in that NGT category. It's been a very competitive category as long as you had a Porsche 911 GT3R. Nothing else has been even slightly competitive in it. But we do see the return this weekend of the JMB team, Jean-Pierre Jabouille's team. Jean-Pierre Jabouille's team? No, I don't mean that at all. The JMB racing team, which has been running their Ferrari 360 Modenas, and they have returned again. So a pair of those you'll see out on the circuit. There is the 77 Red Bull car. Well, his best lap so far, 1:41. At the top of the timesheets at the moment, no changes. Pole position for Nicolas Springer at the moment, and Philippe Favre is a 1:36.2. And the fastest second session time so far has been, in fact, set by the Ferrari, as Andrew just... No, not quite the fastest. The Ferrari's just gone a 1:40.5 compared to a 1:40.6 they did earlier, so they've improved a fraction. That's one of the quickest times, quicker still than Bailey has managed in his Lister. Fastest time so far in this session, 1 minute 37.6, and that is for the Marc Duez and Paul Belmondo Viper. That's one of the yellow cars.
And that's only 0.3 off its quickest it did this morning. So, as we said, I think the track obviously is potentially quick enough for them to swap around the grid positions.
Yeah. So, again, you saw the onboard shot. That's the car 77, Luca Riccitelli and Dieter Questa's car. The RWS Motorsport Red Bull KTM 911 GT3R, giving a good view of this circuit. Jamie Campbell-Walter was playing his Grand Prix 3 computer game on the in the break between first and second qualifying around the Magny Cours track, and learning just how much quicker the Lister would go if it was a Formula 1 car compared to the times that they are setting.
It's always tricky because at this the very tight hairpin at the top where we just saw him going towards, you're very quick through the two corners before that, the sweeping left, sweeping right, and then up the straight, and it's very easy to get your braking points misplaced on that one because it is incredibly slow to get the car to turn around, basically doubling back on yourself.
Well, we saw him there swinging past the Car Sport Holland car, not this one, the other orange car. Confusing that they do look identical because they're both bright orange, and that was the car that's in third place, the championship contender Mike Hazeman's car. So, as you say, very easy to get it wrong. And I was talking to Julian again earlier about passing places here, and basically on the road run down to the hairpin there is the prime passing opportunity. But again, you know, you do see the cars locking up there because it's a very fast approach, and it's not so bad with these cars as with the Formula 1 car, because the fast swerves before them in these GT cars, you can stay latched onto somebody's back bumper.
Yes.
But it doesn't take much now to realise that if you keep on a right-hand line down to the right-hand hairpin, then you've pretty much guarded against it. And in fact, the Lister boys were thinking about trying to get some more lock out of the steering of the car so that they could go in tight and come out tighter as well than they can with the steering rack setup they've got at the moment.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because very often with racing cars, because of the limited mount, because of the restrictions on the way that suspension works, the lock is often very small. But if they can actually offset the rack, you can often make it so that it will turn more one way than it will on the other direction. But it may be also the bodywork may be the restricting factor, in which case a large mallet or perhaps a hacksaw will provide it with a little bit more turning space. Of course, if there's nothing important in its way. But it is a strange thing how little lock these kind of cars have.
Well, of course, famously in Formula 1, it's the hairpin at Monaco that's the one that requires a completely different steering setup from any other track, because they need to turn around almost in their own length. And Formula 1 cars, you don't get much stability at 200 miles an hour if you've got a huge amount of turning circle on the car, and so they're certainly not as nimble as a London taxi, and these cars very much the same as well. You know, if you want good stability in a straight line, you normally parlay that off against having a tiny turning circle, and you don't often need it.
Yes, and also a very slow rack, so you know, for a car to turn back on itself, to make a car not so sensitive, yeah. Obviously the steering wheel, you know, a quarter of a turn does very, very little in these cars, so you can just keep them balanced. But obviously if you've got to turn right back on yourself, you've got to you almost need one of those knobs attached to the wheel, so you can sort of spin it around like a London bus to get it back on itself. But obviously that's where power steering and adjustable power steering, etc., can help.
Well, you're looking here at the championship contenders car, the orange number 25 Viper. This is the Mike Hazeman's Tom Coronel car. Mike Hazeman's has raced most of the series with David Hart. David Hart, it's fair to say, I think, a gentleman racer. Eurosport viewers will probably know him from the Ferrari Porsche Challenge over the years, where he's been very effective. But this is a sort of another step up again, and as it gets down to the nitty-gritty, I think Hart has been quite happy to join a second car with Peter Cox, who is certainly no slouch. He was, of course, driving in the Schnitzer BMW McLaren is the word I'm searching for there. McLaren GT team a couple of years ago with Roberto Ravaglia to very great effect. This is only the second rear-wheel drive car he's driven all year, Peter Cox, his second Viper run, but because he's been racing Honda touring cars in the Euro STC all season. But still, he's got the ability and he's got the speed. And Tom Coronel alongside Mike Hazeman, Andrew, as a driver you know very well from your racing experiences in Japan, where he's really come up through the ranks, having left Europe. He's a very quick, very talented, and you were saying very aggressive driver as well.
He is. He is an extremely quick driver. He could, I'm sure he could hold his own no problem right up at the very top, or in Formula One. He won the Formula Nippon Championship last year, and in a fairly aggressive way, shall we say. It was on the end of a first corner incident, and it barrel rolled, and his car was left sitting on top of his prime opponent's car, which meant that he won the championship. But it was a fairly scary moment. But Tom is a very quick driver, very talented, very dedicated, and I'm sure he'll be at the sharp end of this game as well. And obviously he's in a car that could upset the Julian Bailey situation as well.
Especially because this is still the way they're going to start at the moment, with the listers on the front row and the Hazelman's Coronel car right behind. Now, we're talking about the tactics of this. The pole position is on the left-hand side for Springer and Favre, and Bailey and Campbell-Walter would therefore start on the right, and better able to guard against attack into the hairpin if that's how they started. The problem, of course, is that they have their main rivals right behind. Well, qualifying will continue. Join us in just a moment. Welcome back. We're live at Magny Cours for the final qualifying session for the final race of the FIA GT Championship, and, well, no real changes. The only two cars that have improved their times this session have been Michel Kaufmann's Porsche and Fabien Giroir and Jean-Denis Delatrace's Ferrari 360 Modena. Nobody else, I think, in the entire field, no. One Italian pairing in a Porsche have managed to go quicker than previously. So clearly this is turning into a slower session. What you're looking at here is the Lister Storm that's on pole. Andrew, so you're just about to jump in and...
No, well, all I was going to say was they may well be continuing to try and make up the ultimate setup on the older tyres before finally maybe trying to do their last Banzai. Obviously this type of racing, making a race setup is extremely important. So any cars or anybody out there who feels that they haven't quite maybe dialed it all in, which I would expect all of them to have that opinion, then they will be keen to try and get as many miles on as possible, and also maybe get the setup optimised, and then, as I said, put the tyres on and try for the last Banzai to try and get it on the last, not necessarily the last minute, but the last 5.
Yeah. This is the car that we saw off in the gravel earlier on, incidentally, the art racing car of... no, it's not. It's another all-Italian pairing, Gianluca Coloni and Fabio Mancini. The car that went off was the other art racing car, so their teammates went off early in the session, and it will set them back. But they weren't troubling the first page of the timing screen anyway, so I don't suppose it'll make a huge difference to the major players, except that the slower cars will end up being probably a fairly major factor here for the drivers. Again, even running out along the pit straight and down to the Adelaide hairpin, if you get behind a GT3, even a reasonably well-driven GT3R, in one of the GT cars like the Listers here, you can lose 2 or 3 seconds from the start line down to the Adelaide hairpin just because it's a one-line series of curves and you can't get by.
That's right, yeah. And also that's one of the interesting factors for the race tomorrow, is the fact that Julian's got to, and Jamie have got to take it very carefully. They don't want to get themselves into trouble. They could lose this championship, whereas you kind of feel that the Hazelman-Coronel situation, they could win it. So they will probably be prepared to take the risks on the fact that they've got nothing to lose, whereas Julian and Jamie have got the championship to lose.
They have got everything to lose, and for Lister that would be a double blow, because British viewers will know that, will probably be aware that the Lister team was also in the running for the British GT Championship, and a fortnight ago at Silverstone they lost that title in the final race. Dave Warnock was the driver there, and it just didn't quite happen for them. They needed to have really a huge slice of luck, and they didn't get it. So it would be double a bitter pill for Lawrence Pierce and his team if they were to fail to clinch this as well. And he was saying, the way they started their season, Lister had 4 races right off the bat and won them, and then what was going to be just a sort of temporary run in the championship. They hadn't actually planned to run Bailey and Campbell-Walter in the series at all. When they won the first 4 races, they were sort of hamstrung, really, because they were leading the championship comfortably and could hardly really justify not going and trying to win it. So, it was difficult then for them to pull out. Now, just looking out of our window, I saw Julian Bailey coming howling down the hill, So we might actually, as you said earlier, now be starting to see a little bit more pace being put into things. That was his quickest lap of the session so far, 1 minute 37.6. Now he's faster in the first session, 1 minute 36.4, so still 1.2 seconds away, but that's getting on for the quickest lap in the session so far. We've had a couple in the 1:37.3s, which was the Hart and Cox Viper, and also the Hazemans and Coronel Viper, and Julian now just 0.3 away from their fastest. Looking again here at the Ferrari, and let's see what it does in terms of straight line speed against the Viper. It certainly doesn't seem to be lacking much in horsepower, and gets through quite neatly now. This is very indicative of exactly the sort of areas where it is hard to pass the slower cars, because most of the NGT class, the GT3R Porsches, just aren't that slow. They're very aerodynamic, they're lighter, they're grippier out of the corners, they've got great brakes, and Julian says that basically, you know, especially with the extra 100 of kilos of weight that he's got as success ballast, the big listers and the big front-running cars have trouble stopping, have trouble shifting their weight out of the corners compared to the 911s. And the 911s really aren't that slow through fast corners either. So it's something that we've seen time and time again in the American Le Mans series, and it's repeated here in Europe, that the big cars have trouble getting past the slower cars, because they don't have a big power advantage over them.
No, and also we'll get into one of those situations whereas if you sort of dither around and hang around, then you confuse the car that you're about to overtake, because they think, well, okay, then they will take the corner. So it's one of those things where you have to be very decisive. You want to make yourself seen as much as you possibly can, and you want to do the manoeuvre in a clean, semi-aggressive manner, so as you get it done and dusted. But of course, if you pull off too many of that, or you're too aggressive, or the car in front's a bit too busy, or they've got their own race going on, it's easy to get caught up in a shunt. And like you say, this type of racing, it's easy to do that. And I know that Julian and Jamie are particularly worried about a scenario like that, which again may be playing on their minds. So whereas, as I said, the other cars which don't have that kind of pressure, they'll be able to just dive through and sort of think, well, if we lose it or whatever, c'est la vie, really.
I think the fatal thing, though, is to try and change your pattern as a driver or your race strategy to second guess and to be extra cautious, because we've seen so often that actually causes problems. Because the thing with being a driver when you go for a gap is you've got to know. You can't go, I'll go for it, all right. I mean, that's really, I'm not suggesting that that's what would happen, but certainly if you get into that frame of mind, I think it becomes a real danger. Now, Julian clearly isn't. He's in a very go-for-it frame of mind at the moment, because he's just gone quicker again. Sadly, the director doesn't seem to be able to read a timing screen. Julian's just taken 0.6 off his last best time. He's now a 1:37.044. That's the quickest time in this session, and if that was his best time, he would still be 5th on the grid. So Julian Bailey is howling the list around. Now he's got the headlights off as he comes round this time. So as he comes across the line, I'm looking out the window as you're watching the Chirot Porsche here from the onboard and then from the outside. So did Julian come into the pits that time? The cabin will shake in a moment. Yes, he has.
Yep.
So I think he's probably had the best out of that mixed bag of used tyres. He may well get out of the car now and let Jamie have another run and see if Jamie Campbell-Walter can produce something as well. The Tim Sugden Porsche just coming down into the hairpin again outside of our window, so I happened to notice it, trailing a 400-yard tyre smoke trail as he came in a little hotter than the last time. And talking about the NGT cars, as you're seeing the Chirot car here, this is one of the French Championship cars also running in this FIA race here, as well as the French Championship race this weekend. The NGT cars seem to be caught fairly into two camps. There are the cars that have got Michelin tyres and the cars that haven't, and that pretty much defines your performance, I think. We were talking between ourselves during the break about why, for instance, British GT champions O'Rourke and Sugden and the Pennzoil cars of Magnus Wallander and Jeff Lister and Robert Nern aren't going at the speed of, say, the fastest cars, which are Christophe Boucher and Patrice Gousselard and the others. And I think really it just comes down to a tyre thing.
Well, obviously it makes a huge difference, and if they're just not quite working right, I don't know whether it's a general problem or whether just circuit conditions and track temperature, but obviously that plays such a large factor. But it may well be all right in the race. The fact that the tyres may be a little bit softer, maybe quicker in qualifying, maybe that means that the life will be shorter. So it's another situation. If the tyres go off quicker, if the tyres are harder, maybe they'll actually go slower on a single lap, but of course last an extra maybe 10 laps of that higher performance. Every second you lose earlier on, you can maybe gain backhand plus. So it can go either way in the long race.
Well, the rules with regard to tyres are fairly straightforward, even for a simple person like me. On the practice day, you're allowed 2 sets of tyres per car, and you get free choice of what you want from what the manufacturer's brought. For qualifying, you're also allowed 2 sets of tyres, which is 8 tyres obviously per car, and then you can have as many different tyres as you like during the race, but you have to start the race on a set of tyres made up from your qualifying day allocation. So 4 of the 8 tyres on the car in qualifying have to start the race, and generally, since they're sort of differently sized front to rear, that means you've got a choice of 2 different compounds of tyre or 2 pairs of the same compound, depending on what you've chosen for qualifying. Best lap for the Ferrari, 1:39. Well, that still leaves them in 16th place and chasing the fastest of the NGT cars. So here is the other Ferrari element, one of the pair of JMB racing cars, the 71 machine, Peter Kuseman and Philippe Alliot, who now appears to have turned completely white, not entirely related to driving the Ferrari, I don't think. He's got very, very grey over the last couple of seasons, but still enjoying his racing with these cars, even though they're not right up at the sharp end of the grid. Live at Magny Cours for the second qualifying session that will finalise the grid positions for the final race of the FIA GT series. Live on Eurosport, of course, and limbering up, if you like, for next year's Eurosport racing weekends, which will heavily feature the FIA GT Championship, and also taking in the Euro STC, and the Formula Renault 2000 Championship will be a part of that package as well. A lot of live motorsport coming to you in terms of four-wheel competition. We certainly got plenty of live bike racing with superbikes and the Grand Prix and the motocross on Eurosport. But this is a way of encouraging our four-wheel competition as well, and moving it into a live time slot. Well, you're looking here at one of the JMB GSA Ferraris, and the JMB team, of course, so successful with the open-top Ferrari 333 SPs, 3 times winner of the Sports Racing World Cup, and they've moved away from that now with their cars. They're in the NGT class, but finding themselves really outclassed by these machines, not just the Red Bull cars, but these machines meaning the Porsche 911 GT3Rs, a purpose-made Le Mans winner, the 911 GT3R, whereas this is a privately funded, privately developed essential road car conversion. There is no competition, a competizione version of the 360 Modena, and so the JMB team are really doing all their own legwork, whereas if you buy a 911 GT3R, Porsche sorted it so it would win Le Mans and then started selling them afterwards. Very much the way, of course, they've always supported their customers in racing, and an awful lot of customers as well in Europe, across the world, using the 911 GT3R. Well, in the NGT category, since we're there, Patrice Gousselard and Christophe Bouchou's car is fastest in the NGT class. They will start at the moment 9th on the grid, as you see the Ferrari locking up heavily there at the hairpin. Second in that class will be the car we've got the onboard with, the 77 car, Jean-Louis Riccitelli and Dieter Quester. And that is the first of the Luca Riccitelli. Jean-Louis? That's the first of the, don't laugh, it's not funny. The first of the Red Bull cars. Second row of the grid, effectively in that category, although they are split up a little bit by other cars. Starting in 16th place overall will be Hans-Jörg Hofer and Bob Warwick, brilliant Bob as ever, and very relaxed and smiley around here, so clearly not feeling any pressure at all. And Magnus Wallander and Nigel Smith will start 4th in the NGT category in the first of the pair of yellow Pennzoil Porsches. Right behind them, and by right behind I mean 4/10 of a second behind, will be Steve O'Rourke and Sim Sugden. They'll be 5th fastest in the NGT category, and 6th in the NGT category will be Robert Nern and Jeff Lister. Again, a lot of those names will be familiar to viewers of the British GT Championship. Into the pits comes the Ferrari. Andrew, what have you seen out the window?
Well, no, I was just watching both the Dutch cars are in, and I've just seen Tom Coronel and...
carry on talking as I point out the window.
Yes. I'm just hearing out to see what's going on. Both Tom and Peter Cox have both got out of the cars. So I honestly think that probably they will have done their times, whatever they're going to do, with the amount of time remaining. So they are not going to improve in this session.
Well, as I sort of guessed, so it has come to pass. Make a note in your diaries, because that doesn't happen very often. The Lister is back out and running at speed now. Jamie Campbell-Walter is at the wheel. So, as I kind of guessed, they did say that they would both run in qualifying, so it wasn't inspiration on my part. It was just 1 and 1 equals 2. Julian Bailey's been and done, and now Jamie is going to go out and have a run. And as you said earlier, Andrew, they are still looking to put as many miles on the car as they can. They've got a complete spare chassis here and loads of backup parts, so they're not worried about, something running out of life or anything like that. What they want to do is to be absolutely certain they've got the car as good as possible. This is Jamie's first flying run. He's got the headlamps on again, so clearly he's not about to be held up by anybody if he can help it. And I would think that he will probably try and lay it on the line as well. Julian got close to being able to improve on there earlier. Well, 0.6 away, almost literally to the thousandth. So the fastest time at the moment in this second session has been set by Julian Bailey. It's a 1 minute 37.044 compared to 136.441 he did earlier, and 136.2, which was Philippe Favre's earlier session. Now, I haven't seen any improvement from Favre at all. The fastest lap the pole car has done in this session is a 1 minute 41.6. Favre knows this track like the back of his hand. He's got a spare set of tyres. Maybe he's saving it for a grandstanding finale when everybody else has shot their bolt. We'll find out live in Eurosport in just a moment when we return after this. Welcome back live, Eurosport on board as we come across the start-finish line. And this is one of the NGT cars. Yeah, there you are, the Chirot car, number 53. Andre Arler at the wheel there. And Niklaus Springer still fastest, the Niklaus Springer Philippe Favre Lister. In fact, no real times, no real changes at all in the top half dozen. 7th and 8th placed and 9th placed cars have all gone quicker, but not enough to change the order of the grid around. So the top 10 staying as it was earlier on. We're going to try and catch up with Julian Bailey. He's just got out of the Lister storm. You're looking at it now on screen. That's his teammate Jamie Campbell-Walter, and then proving exactly what we said about how hard it is, even at the Adelaide hairpin, to outbrake a 911 GT3R. He just couldn't get close enough, and it's such a tight racing line. Now, he's back right out of that. The lap's been ruined as far as he's concerned.
Which is interesting, because that shows he is trying to get a proper run.
Yeah, he's definitely trying to have a good go. We'll try and catch up with Julian. We think he's down in the pit lane ready to speak to us, so I may have to interrupt myself in just a moment. But there is his teammate, and Jamie will now just be cooling the tyres down, and towards the end of the lap he'll start having a run down through the final couple of corners to start another fly. He's giving himself a bit of a break in traffic, and I shouldn't be at all surprised if he makes the Lister nice and wide so that none of these piddly little GT3Rs get by him. So blue flag's being waved. I think he's pretty well aware of what's going on. Now let's go down to the pits and catch up with his teammate Julian Bailey.
You've got provisional pole position at the moment. Is the track faster for the second session?
Well, I think the session is not quicker, but it's certainly not slower. So I think it depends to get a clear lap. And at the moment, it's hard to do a 36. Everybody's doing 37. And I keep cross my fingers to get the pole position.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Thank you.
So, as Andrew pointed out, and the director still has failed to notice, that was Philippe Favre, who is the co-driver of the number 15 car that sits on the interim pole position. As he was saying, though, it seems difficult to go quicker, and Favre, probably the most experienced driver in the field here at Magny Cours. He seems to think he's done more laps here than he's done at probably every racetrack he's ever raced at in his life combined. But still, although they have not managed to get within 5 seconds of their fastest time, this car has, the number 14 car has. Julian Bailey went to within 4/10 of his best time. 1.4 seconds of his best time, which is still a long way away. So no real chance of improving, I think, on their grid position. They don't really need to, because they have got their teammate on pole position, the Favre and Springer car, and Julian is quite hopeful that if he takes a firm inside line down into the first hairpin inside Nicolas Springer or Philippe Favre, whoever starts it, then he will be allowed through, and I can't see any reason why that wouldn't happen either. Of course, what Julian then really needs is for the number 15 car to be sharply in behind him to stop the Dutch cars getting in behind. But once the problem, I think, Andrew, is once the door is open, it's very hard to shut it, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and of course it goes through that area, that sort of slightly grey area of what's acceptable and what's not, as we've seen so much obviously this year in the Formula One with the team tactics. It is a team sport, as we said, normally, but obviously these drivers all want to win, but there is a championship at stake here for Lister.
Well, I would think that Jamie is on a different set of tyres now to the one that Jill. Maybe he's on the same set of tyres, and they've kept one set of tyres from the first qualifying session to start the race on, and just pounding around on the second set. Jamie's last lap, 1:37.863, so still some way away from the best of the session, which is their time of 1:37.044. And somewhere away from their qualifying 1:36.4.
And he seems to be having a real problem just trying to find a clear lap. Obviously, a lot of the other cars are slowing down or are just running, doing their race distance maybe, or practice. Not race distance, but race practice. But obviously, he's having a terrible trouble just to try and find a clear lap to do a proper lap time. But so it's hard to actually gauge how close he would be on a clear lap.
Well, it's a common problem, isn't it? Whenever you're trying to put in a qualifying run, there always seems to be somebody going around fairly slowly. And he's certainly found his fair share of them since he's been out. 36 car here, you're seeing just making a quick pit call. Michel and Manuel Monteiro, the father and son combination. And again, Campbell Walter at speed, but here the Racing Box Viper running into exactly the same deal. The Italian drivers, Luca Capagliari.
Oh, and I just said.
Oh dear, Angelo Sargent, Rafael Sanguiolo, and there.
Get that out. If you just keep the wheels spinning, it might just be all right.
Well, I wonder if that was Gabriele Sabatini, Fabio Villa, or maybe Marco Spinelli, who are the three drivers of that car here.
I know which one I'd favour.
Yeah, I know which one I go for as well, but it's just too obvious for words. Here's the other Kaufmann car, the other Freisinger Motorsport car, not the Wolfgang Kaufmann car. That's the Yukihiro Hane car, which it seems as though Freisinger Motorsport seem to have cars all over the planet almost simultaneously. Every racetrack I go to, they turn up with a pair of cars. They're running the FIA series, the American Le Mans series, and German Porsche Cup and all sorts of stuff going on as well. As you see a little replay of that, it's been pretty non-damaging, I would think, but in those sort of situations you never really know, do you? Because you start off and you think, by the amount of rattling under a car, you think, well, surely, now the rattling stopped after a lap and a half, that's pretty much all the gravel out, and then suddenly the suspension locks up unexpectedly because there's a stone stuck in a spring, or the worst thing is getting into the brake calipers, isn't it? That they
yes.
lodge themselves in there, and then suddenly you've got no brake pedal.
No, and also they can work their way into the cockpit, even though it seems to be sealed up. It always seems to get one under your feet, get one behind the gibber, the brake pedal or the throttle or something, so it can add up to quite a disastrous situation from a small incident like that.
Looking at the two Car Sport Holland cars running nose to tail here. This is the faster of the pair, the championship contenders. Mike Haseman's Tom Coronel, their last lap 1:41.2, and Jamie Campbell Walters 1:41.8. So pretty much on a pace with each other. And the second of the Car Sport Holland cars did a 1:41.5 compared to their teammates 1:41.2 on the same lap. So
this is shaping up, from a championship point of view, that's really shaping up. If you look at the first session, the Bailey, Jamie's car was only, 200ths quicker. And then, of course, look at this second session, they're only 3/10ths. But quicker. So that actually, from a race point of view, also they look to be circulating very similar times. So this could be a hell of a battle right down to the end.
Top 7 cars, including both the Car Sport cars, covered by 1.1 seconds on the grid. And as you say, the sharp end by a couple of tenths. So I think it's going to be a very competitive showing. Now, with the two Listers, with the two Dutch Vipers, with the 3 yellow Paul Belmondo run Vipers, And I think you can probably throw into the mix as well the best of the Porsches. The Wolfgang Kaufmann car, if he starts it, certainly I'm sure will be in there as well. And the Kumpen and Gosselin Viper, which is at the moment quicker than Duez and Belmondo, which is quite unusual. I don't think necessarily Marc Duez got the best out of the car in the first session, but he's going to be very quick in this. It's not for nothing that he's on, sort of permanent, semi-permanent loan from the Orica team. He knows all about driving the Vipers, and you can see there, 10, 11 and 12, 4th, 5th and 6th on the grid is going to be all yellow. So there's an awful lot of action, I think, in store for us tomorrow. 3 hours, more than 2 hours of which will be live on Eurosport tomorrow, starting at 11 o'clock in the morning. That's 10 on British Eurosport. So plenty of opportunity to see some flat-out racing. And with the championship still up for grabs and so finely balanced as well, I think, we've really got a chance to see some pretty spectacular action. I'm sure the opening laps are going to be very fraught.
Yes, I think so. Maybe a little bit rough. The odd wing mirror perhaps knocked off.
I wouldn't doubt it. The cars are so close, and it is going to be pretty important to make your moves and get yourself into a decent racing position early on. I think it might be a little bit boisterous in the first few laps. Now, Jamie Campbell-Walter just being pushed back out of the Weybridge area down in the pits below us, so clearly the number 14 lister has also done its running. The 15 car is being shown as out on track at the moment. So are the two Carsport Holland cars, and so are a pair of Belmondo Vipers in the GT class, and half a dozen others. Now we're trying to catch up with Tom Coronel down in the pits as Mike Hasemans is in this car. Let's hear from his teammates, see what he's got to say.
Tom, you had some mechanical problems yesterday. Today you're third in qualifying.
Yeah, everything looks okay. I mean, at the moment we were quickest Viper, but our opponents are first and second, so it will be a very difficult race. But the car seems to handle very well, the tires are really good, so I don't see any problems for tomorrow.
Okay, good luck with the race.
Thank you very much.
So as he says, no problems foreseen, but I'm sure, as you mentioned, Andrew, that everybody will be very anxious about the possibility of contact or damage earlier on, and that's certainly something that I honestly don't think that Lister or the Carsport team will be aiming to cause, is damage to their rivals. I think that they would both like to win it in a straight-out, head-to-head slugging match.
Yeah, well, I agree. I mean, I think that car's quick enough. It would be more dangerous or more likely if one of the cars was actually slower and they felt they weren't in with the shout, and so they'd probably feel, well, we've got nothing to lose, let's just wind this thing right up. But if they actually feel they've got sufficient pace, which looking at the monitor at the moment, certainly that any of the cars are capable of winning tomorrow, so I would say that they wouldn't necessarily want to throw it away. But it will also be interesting to see who the start drivers will be, because that again will probably have a bit of an influence on the way the first few corners are handled.
Well, I think the big guns will definitely come out firing. I'd say Nicholas Springer will take the second stint, so will Jamie Campbell-Walter, so will Mike Hasemans, so will Vincent Voss, so will Kumpen Gosselin. Maybe Patrice Gosselin would do the first stint. I don't know. I would think Peter Cox will probably start the 39 car. Marc Duez will start their car. It will be big guns out. And then again, you see, it's been fine for pretty much all through practice, and it's warm and dry in qualifying. But French Meteo this morning was saying that we may get rain tomorrow. Now we all know what happened in the rain in the Lausitzring in eastern Germany. It poured with rain, absolutely bucketed down, and Wolfgang Kaufmann won it in the Freisinger Motorsport Porsche. And it's not beyond the bounds of possibility, although in a dry race, at the moment they're only 8th, and not on the pace of the Vipers or the Listers. It's not beyond the bounds of possibility that if we get rain, then suddenly the whole complexion of the race gets turned on its head. And you also, of course, then get the huge gamble on tyre choices that wet weather brings. And you can be hero or zero in 30 seconds by making the wrong choice.
Well, yes, and probably I would say the forecast, the way it's the possibility of rain, we could easily over 3 hours have some rain and changeable conditions, which again makes it quite an entertaining situation for us, certainly looking at it. And and a tricky one for all the team. Again, as we saw, changing onto slick tyres too early. Again, as we see earlier on this year, and that can be an expensive choice. When it's cold like this, to try and generate tyre temperature in a slick tyre when the track's damp is difficult, even though the track might look quick enough for slick tyres. To go out on cold tyres and to try and get them to come in to get the rubber warm enough to get the grip, this time of year it can be a problem.
The other thing, of course, on a wet racetrack is you are then, if you're in a Lister or a Viper, not just fighting all the Listers and Vipers, but all those pesky GT3R Porsches as well, because they've got a smaller footprint, but they weigh less, they've got less power, they've got much better traction courtesy of that hanging out the back flat six turbo engine, and they are really nimble in the rain. In fact, I was, again, in the Lister truck, we were talking about the problems of the GT3Rs, and Julian and Jamie were going, God, I'd love to have a go, because they really look chuckable, you know, whereas you have to be much more certain of what you're doing with something that's so much bigger and heftier, like the Listers and the Vipers. They really fancy a go in a GT3R just for the hell, and, you know, hanging the tail out. But if it gets wet, then if it gets seriously wet, or if it gets very patchy and mixed, then suddenly you're looking at the possibility, and it may be no more than that, of an NGT car winning it, yes, which would really throw the cat among the pigeons. And Christophe Boucher and Patrice Gousselard would be the combination you'd have to go for in their number 52 car. They're already the series champions, don't forget. 2 races ago they tied that up. But, you know, it's not beyond the bounds of possibility. Nicolaus Springer at the wheel of the 15 car. That will start tomorrow's race from pole position. The checkered flag out confirms that there is now no chance, if there was any slim chance before, of anybody else improving. Only half a dozen cars in the entire field managed to improve on their times from this morning's session, and nobody changed their positions. So Listers front row, and then Vipers, well, pretty much all the way down the timing order as far as you can see, until the Kaufmann Freisinger Motorsport Porsche in 8th place. But the important Viper, the championship contending Mike Hazelman's car, is in 3rd place. So he's then got the 3 Belmondo cars between himself and his teammates, Mike Hart and Peter Cox, David Hart and Peter Cox, but still all the Vipers very much in the mix. And although I think Julian Bailey and Jamie Campbell-Walter will be relieved that there were no changes in qualifying, they will still be certainly concerned that everything seems to be on a very level playing field, and they've got an awful lot of opposition for tomorrow's race. So, there you go. We're going to try and catch up with Lawrence Pierce in a moment. He'll be right down the far end of the pit lane. He always likes to put himself at the pit exit. He always does it, and he always admits to wanting to be there. I actually didn't quite get around to asking him why that particularly is, but I think he just likes to be able to see what's going on from his position at the end of the pit lane. His car's first and second on the grid, and the championship leading pairing of Julian Bailey and Jamie Campbell-Walter are starting alongside their teammates. And, well, both of the championship contending cars have got the race here to win or lose, and so, you know, it's I think although there's 4.5 points in it, there may as well be none, because it is so even. Basically, if the Lister wins, it's job done. If the Lister doesn't win, then there is some mathematical stuff coming in, but what they desperately have to avoid, both cars, is a failure, a retirement, or an accident of some kind. So there is the number 14 car, and here is Lawrence Pierce.
Pole position, first time in Magny Cours. Looks easy for you again.
It wasn't easy at all, actually. It's very close at the top. As you know, Philippe's carrying 80 kilos less than Julian, so we thought Philippe had a good chance of the pole. Obviously, we were just hoping that Julian could get second, which was what he did at the end of the first session.
The car looks comfortable here in Magny Cours.
Yeah, it's very good. We've got no particular problems at the moment.
So you're comfortable for the win this weekend?
I don't know about that. I never like to speculate on things like that, Ben, but, you know, we're in good shape.
Okay, thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you.
There you are, Lawrence Pierce. He is Captain Quotes. If you put a camera in front of him, you always get a reaction. Not confident, well, quietly confident, I think, rather than pretty certain that they're going to get a win, but certainly they're as well placed as they would like to be. All black and white front row. I don't think you could have asked for an awful lot more, but the competition, as you can see there by the fractions of seconds that separate the top half dozen, very close indeed.
No, it looks good. They must be confident. Obviously, all you can do is park the cars in the front row, and as long as they've got their strategy sorted out, then that's all they can do.
So we will be live tomorrow from Magny Cours, as I mentioned, Martin Haven and Andrew Gilbert-Scott. We will be on air from moments before 11 o'clock at 10 a.m. Sunday morning. British Eurosport will be on live for more than 2 of the 3-hour duration of the race. So join us for that. Until then, from Andrew Gilbert-Scott, from myself, Martin Haven from Magny Cours, it's bye for now.